Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Terry Bush. I'm the new Chief Data Officer at DIA. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing the panel this morning as they come in. Ms. Janice Glover-Jones, Mr. Mark Munsell, Ms. Sally Holcomb, Mr. John Edwards, Mr. Gordon Bitko, and of course, Ms. Jennifer Crone. I'd like to just take a moment for those who are not familiar, for each of the panel members to introduce themselves. We can just go right down the line, I think is the best way to do it.
Hi, I'm Janice Glover-Jones. I am the CIO for the Defense Intelligence Agency.
My name is Mark Munsell. I'm the Deputy CIO for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and I'm here in St. Louis.
And I'm Sally Holcomb, the Deputy CIO for the National Security Agency.
Hi, John Edwards, CIO for CIA.
Good morning, Gordon Bitko, FBI CIO.
Good morning, I'm Jennifer Crone, the Acting CIO for the Intelligence Community.
Thank you very much. We'll just get right into it with the questions. First question from Ms. Jennifer Crone. What is working and why? And maybe more provocatively, what is not working and why?
Thank you.
With iSight?
When I think about what's working well for iSight, for each of those aspects that I think about, there's also a flip side. There's a but, an area where if we don't focus on that in the coming years, then we're not going to achieve what we had hoped to when we set out on iSight. So I'd like to talk about a couple of those yes, but areas. So one of the areas that I think has gone very well is our success in actually building the core infrastructure services that are in place today. To a large extent, all of the core infrastructure services, that base of iSight, is in place and is being used now. To one extent or another, some are more developed than others. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of what a tremendous accomplishment that was, that we were able to build this entire suite of new capabilities, modernized in line with what industry standards are, and that we did it as an enterprise, thinking primarily about what's best for the community and not thinking along agency lines, which is how we've always been set up to do things before. And the fact that we did this at a time that our IT budgets were not growing. So that's something that I think we can all be very proud of, that we have actually built those core infrastructure services. But unlike what Field of Dreams tells us, sometimes if you build it, they do not come. And one of the areas where we have lagged, that's not going as well as we might hope, where we need to focus, is to increase the adoption of and migration to those core infrastructure services. And I'd say there's a few reasons why we are not making the same progress on that we might have hoped. The first is that we need to make sure that the services are very easy to use, transparent, easy to migrate to and to adopt. And so, for example, that's one of the reasons that we created the newest of the core infrastructure services, the data services architecture, in order to make the clouds both easier to use and more interoperable. Another reason why I think our adoption of the core infrastructure services has lagged somewhat is because we have to make sure that they're broadly available. And I mean that both in terms of geographically as well as across multiple domains. For the first several years of iSight, we've really focused on the TS-SCI domain, and we focused largely on services being available CONUS, and even more specifically within the Washington metropolitan area. But clearly, most of our colleagues, our partners, our customers don't live on the TS-SCI fabric alone within the Beltway in DC. So we need to make sure that the iSight services are available on secret and unclassified levels as well as appropriate, and that they're available with full capability and without latency out west and overseas as well. And so we've been working on that. We've got a multi-fabric initiative underway to identify what services we might want to bring to the secret and unclassified sides, and Secret C2S will be launching in November. We're also looking at global hosting architecture to ensure that our services are available around the world. So that's one of the ways that I think the reasons that we're lagging. The last one I would say is safeguarding. And it's not in terms of the technical ability that we have to keep data secure and to ensure we tag the data, tag the people, and that only the right people see the right data at the right time. It's really more about building trust in those capabilities. We've demonstrated time and time again through multiple capabilities and pilots that we truly can keep data secure and safeguard our networks. What we really need to do is ensure, well, first we need to keep testing and demonstrating that, but to ensure that everybody around the community and everybody who's using us has that trust in those safeguarding and secure capabilities so that they feel comfortable putting their most secure data there. So for this first reason, the first way that things are going well but not going well, I think that what that really points to is that it's not enough to build great services that have tremendous capabilities. They also have to be easy to use, they have to be broadly available, and we have to have trust in them. There's a couple of other sort of things that are going well, but areas that I'd mention. One is that we've had some really impressive mission success stories through the mission user group campaigns and through a number of activities happening with the services and with different IC elements. What we haven't done as great a job at, the but, is communicating those stories and ensuring that folks around the IC and DoD really understand what capabilities there are, what's available to them, and how those might translate into the problems that they're trying to solve. We haven't really figured out how to take these great case studies, these great capabilities that we've demonstrated, and turn them into something that we can work at scale. And that's where we'll really hit that tipping point. And then the third area where I think something really important and interesting has been happening with iSight is our ability to think as an enterprise and our ability to work as if we are one intelligence community. So I would say I've been in OD&I since almost the beginning for about 12 years, and I don't think I've ever seen an interagency group that thought as corporately as much like one team as the team that we've got sitting up here right now. Increasingly, so we've also got great partnership at the agency deputies levels with our CDOs and up and down the scale. Increasingly, we really do have widespread buy-in to the idea that data is an IC asset and that we should do in common what is commonly done. So that's really exciting. The downside is we're not really, while we're thinking like that, we're not necessarily structured to act like that yet. Every agency, every element has its own policies, its own culture, its own language. In some ways, we're almost divided by a common language when we all think we're talking about something called systems, and we all have a different definition for systems. We've got bilateral sharing agreements that don't take into account other agencies. So what's going very well there is that while we're increasingly thinking as one enterprise across agency and entity and element boundaries, it's still difficult for us to actually operate that way, and that's something that's going to take a while. So I think the bottom line for all of this, a big lesson learned for me, is that we have to think of iSight itself as a sort of agile development. That the fundamental objectives that we had set for iSight, which is that we want to increase integration and information sharing, to ensure safeguarding and security of our networks and data, and to increase efficiency, those strategic objectives are as fundamentally important today as they were when we set them in 2012. And then our basic principles of data as an IC asset, tag the data, tag the people, do in common what is commonly done, all of that is still valid today. What might be changing is how we thought we were going to achieve all of those, because technology has changed over the last 5, 6, 7 years, as well as our understanding of how we work together and how we interact with that technology. So we need to hold true to the principles and to the strategic objectives we had set for ourselves when we embarked on iSight, and maybe not get too hung up on the exact ways that we thought that we were going to get there. So that's just a few thoughts on what's going well and maybe what's not going quite as quickly as we had hoped.
Great. A few follow-on questions, if I may. Are there things that should be done at the IC enterprise level that are currently not occurring?
I think the next frontier in terms of what we want to address at the enterprise level goes beyond enterprise IT, where we've been focusing our efforts so far. And that's to get into business systems, to start looking at financial management, human capital, our acquisition services. And these are things that are not necessarily in the purview of our CIOs that are sitting up here, but it's kind of the obvious next step if you look at the areas where we really can achieve greater efficiency, security, and integration. And increasingly, we're all using for a lot of these services similar products and platforms, and increasingly we're putting them onto C2S. And so it sort of begs the question, why are we sort of paying for the same product and the same capability multiple times and then having it next to each other, if you will, within the same cloud, instead of pooling our resources and going in on the best that industry has to offer and really pursuing an enterprise approach to that, especially since we have demonstrated we can keep proprietary and sensitive data compartmented. We can make sure that that's not spread more broadly than it's supposed to be. So I think something we haven't been doing or even really thinking about a lot at the enterprise level that we perhaps should next, some years down the line, would be business systems.
Great. Along those lines, are there things that are currently being pursued at the IC enterprise level that should be rethought?
I think there's one that we did rethink, and that's enterprise management services that we're in the process of rethinking. We had thought that having a core infrastructure service at the enterprise level that provided sort of a 611 and enterprise help desk for all iSight services would make sense. As we built out the requirements and started to build out that capability, for some agencies, it didn't seem to make sense to them, that this wasn't a service that would make sense for them to pursue at the enterprise level instead of being just continuing with what they were able to do agency by agency. Now, for other agencies and entities, it did make a lot of sense. And so we were able to pursue an opportunity to pursue a path where the agencies for whom that made the most sense could move it forward, and then we would keep it at sort of a pilot level so that other agencies down the road could buy in if they wanted to. But we didn't just say, we have decided this is a core infrastructure service and thus everybody must get on it, but truly look at what made the most sense for each entity, if they should do it. Sometimes it makes sense to do things individually instead of at enterprise level. I did want to say on this sort of an area where I believe we are pursuing an enterprise approach, though some people may have perceived it differently, and that's with the common desktop. So when we originated the idea of the common desktop, the goals of that were increased security, interoperability in terms of being able to work across agencies and elements, and as well mobility, being able to log on and see everything you're supposed to see no matter where you are in the world. So we are still, and we will continue to pursue all of those objectives as an enterprise. The part that we've let go of is the idea that the only way to achieve those objectives as an enterprise is to always go with one specific corporate solution and one particular vendor. That's not necessarily always the best way that we can achieve our objectives. Again, getting back to this idea of thinking in an agile way about iSight. How do we achieve what we were trying to achieve without getting hung up on the ways we thought were going to be the best way to go? So I believe that we are continuing to work towards the goals of a common desktop at an enterprise level, and that's pursuing interoperability, security, and mobility across all the agencies and elements.
Great. Last question on this round is, what benefits have you realized to date from iSight, and what do you anticipate to benefit?
Some of the benefits that we've realized to date, not just the things that are promising, but that we've actually seen, we have seen some real benefits in security, that we've got increased transparency and insight into what's happening in the shared space. So that's been very important. I'll mention here enterprise licensing agreements, which have helped us by having one, again, approach as a community to our licensing agreements. It's helped us be more efficient. It's helped us operate as one enterprise. And by having that standardization of terms and conditions, we can work across the community without having to worry about who's under which of the different licensing agreements. So that's been something that's really a great benefit that's a part of iSight. As I'd mentioned before, we have had some significant mission successes in a number of different fields. What we haven't done really is been able to translate those necessarily into a large-scale change across the IC that I think we're poised to make in the years to come. And perhaps the most important change, because it's something that has implications beyond IT, is our change in how we sort of perceive ourselves culturally as one enterprise. I think iSight has sort of been a forcing function to bring all the different agencies and elements to the table and think about how we can pursue a vision and objectives that are for the entire community and not just every agency sort of looking out for its own equities and sort of guarding those against others. So I think that's a fundamental change in how we see ourselves. And I would put iSight up there with joint duty as one of the most important ways that we've tried to foster that idea of the IC as one entity and transcend the boundaries between agencies and elements. So I think that's one of the most important changes and something that will have benefits for years and decades to come, because it's not just about CIOs and CDOs and about IT, it's about fundamentally changing how the IC does business and how we see ourselves.
Thank you very much. Next question is for Mr. Bitko at NSA. What is the impact of cyber, its impact on our infrastructure?
So it's hard to call out one specific mission area as the thing that's been impacted. I think what iSight has enabled is a tremendous opportunity to achieve mission outcomes that would not have been possible with the legacy infrastructure. So for example, if you look at cyber as a source of vast data that contains a lot of unknowns, GovCloud provides an opportunity to join that data and to find the unknowns and correlate them and allow the results of that to be shared with people who may not have been authorized to access the data in its raw form. So whether it's cyber or various types of foreign intelligence related to that, you still have an opportunity to achieve those outcomes and to learn from the data to a degree you never would have before. And that's just one capability that iSight offers to do that. So it just creates an array of tools that allows for that discovery, for that exploration to a degree that would not have been before.
Thank you, Ms. Holcomb. Sorry for getting that one mixed up there. Next question is Mr. Edwards at CIA. What is the best practice for using iSight with lessons learned, and help us differentiate between C2S and GovCloud?
Okay, first of all, let me thank Janice for having us here today. It's always good to come speak to this event. We were here last year. In fact, Sal and I were joking. We were on the couch last year, if you remember. So NSAC on the couch. Although last year we thought other people would be here with us, so Sal and I sat on opposite ends. And that was kind of awkward. So today we're together, and this is known as Cloud Couch.
Cloud Couch.
Understand. So to answer the question, first of all, how do you differentiate which one to use? And the short answer is it depends. So it depends on several things. One is, where's your data? Where's it located? What type of analytics are you going to use? What type of analytics do you need to use? Where can you get your data to? But it really comes down to what's your mission and what's your mission impact, or excuse me, your mission needs. As we like to say, everything, as Jennifer just mentioned, everything we're doing is we're putting tools in this intelligence community toolbox. And so my sons and I, we like to work on cars. We just don't have a screwdriver in the toolbox. You can't fix everything with a screwdriver. We have a whole host of tools, and that's what these clouds offer, is a whole host of capabilities, a host of infrastructure and services that you can use. And just like when you're working on something, again, I go back to my car analogy, I may pull tools in and out of that toolbox numerous times for a certain job that we're doing, and I see this as the same way. If you look at C2S, I'll speak to that, and I'll let Sally speak to GovCloud. We put that in place in 2014. It's gone really, really well. As Jennifer mentioned, we're not there yet. We're still scratching the surface of folks getting their stuff into the cloud. We've got 11 out of the 17 agencies in. We're seeing 200% growth year over year. And kind of the bumper stickers of why using it, we have increased mission effectiveness. We've got know how to control our cost. We know how to infrastructure at the speed of mission. So now what used to take me months to do now takes me minutes. But more importantly, it's I use what I use when I need it for as much as I need it. And then when I'm done with it, I blow it up or I put it back. So again, it's given us a capability and a collection of tools that we can use across all of our mission sets, again, as needed, as required. I'll let you speak to.
Okay. And so with GovCloud, it's not a particularly helpful thing to have data sets that you know well, and you know what questions to ask, and you know what type of answers you're going to get. You can do that from any database or repository. We can do that in GovCloud, but it's not necessarily the ideal tool for that job. What we like to do is that big data fusion analysis, where you take masses of data that you're not sure you understand fully. You know enough to groom that data to make it useful for discovery, but you can put it all in the same place and ask questions where you're not sure what answers you're going to get, and you can use that tool to get those correlations and get the power of the join that way. So it's a difference in what you're trying to get done, what kind of car you're working maybe, or what piece of the car you're working on, and to use the tool that you can get the outcomes that you're seeking from.
Thank you both very much. Next question is from Ms. Glover-Jones, DIA. What specific changes and challenges are you facing with staffing qualified personnel?
So I think all of us are facing some of the challenges associated with recruiting skilled people in our area, because all of us are up against industry in recruiting the competition. And we have various different programs, STEM programs that each agency probably has that's a little different with it. But in particular, we are looking for skills as digital transformation is upon us. We are looking for probably not so much NSA, because they probably already have a lot of them, but most of us are looking for data scientists, and how do we recruit and retain data scientists. We're also looking for people that can write analytics, that can write Java, that can write Python, and so before the director knew, I had already recruited Ruben, so all of you are already out. We are also looking for skills in cyber engineers, the ability to understand cyber operating in a cloud environment is one of the areas that we're looking at. And so I think it depends on each one of the specific needs in each one of the agencies, but in particular to DIA, we're also looking at how do we begin to retool and redevelop some of our people that are already there and to grow those skills around data visualization, as well as statisticians and things along those nature.
Thank you very much. Next question is for Mr. Munsell. Will iSight endure?
Would seem a travesty if I said no after everything we've heard. Obviously, it'll endure, right? It just makes sense. Even if policy got in the way, even if new administration got in the way, even if the goodness, the genie is already out of the bottle with the goodness. I think there's no way to sort of take back the benefits that we've already gained from the concept of iSight. So shared infrastructure, check, shared mission. We don't talk about that a lot, but there's the overlapping mission and the integration of intelligence is really why we're doing this. But I got to tell you, I think, and I'll get back to what Jennifer started talking about with the way we're going to do it is probably going to change. It's not just about agencies sort of having these big programs where they kind of donate their resources and leadership. I think the fact that now we're looking at an agile approach to development will really change the way we do this. So the fact that we'll start using a common code repository, the fact that we won't keep rewriting the same thing over and over again or keep buying the same thing over and over again. I think that's what we're going to see change. The fact that we'll have hundreds of developers, thousands of developers that will share in this capability and be able to reuse all the code that we've already made across the entire IC. I think that's going to be very difficult to stop once you get that into the hands of the developer. And once they have that, it will change everything that we do in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think there's no going back. I think it's impossible to put that genie back in the bottle.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Bidco, FBI, I'm so sorry for earlier botching the names. Your question is, how will the IC deal with emerging IoT capabilities that are built into everything we use in our lives?
Thanks. I thought for a second I was going to need to join Sally and John on the couch.
Come on, there's room.
So Internet of Things is actually a really great focus for all the points that have already been brought up here. The increasing volume of data, the cultural challenges of having the workforce understand the implications, and I would say not only for the IC, but for the FBI perspective, for law enforcement as well, and also the policy implications that really reflects on the neat fact that we need an environment, we need tools that are agile, that move quickly, that respond, so that we don't all tackle those same problems all by ourselves individually, as has unfortunately been the history going back over the years as new technologies have emerged. At the speed of IoT, at the speed the internet's moving, we aren't going to be able to afford to do that. So we really have to figure out how to collaborate and partner and leverage GovCloud and C2S and agile development and common code repositories and all the things that people here have already talked about in order to make sure that we work smartly on the IoT problem. And I would say that's one among many. It's easy to look out further out and see there are going to be other huge volume increases in data that we collect for other reasons. And we need to continue to build on that and build organizations that are agile and flexible enough that we can respond, that we can adapt, and that we can move quickly. So I'll also answer the previous question a little bit. iSight has to endure. It has to evolve, though, right? It has to be able to be flexible and dynamic enough that as new technologies, as new data collections, as new investigative authorities become available to us, that we can quickly solve those problems and solve them collectively. Otherwise, we're continually falling behind and losing the fight.
Thank you so much. Next question for OD&I. What is the IC's plans to deal with wireless, secure and unclass, inside of SCIFs?
So first, let me talk about, when we talk about mobility in the IC, we're not necessarily always talking about wireless. It's, I would say, just as important that users are able to log on anywhere if they go, whether it's in Fort Meade or St. Louis or Kabul or Canberra, that anywhere they go, they can log on and see all of the information that they're supposed to see. That's really, to me, some of the most important sort of mobility, and doesn't have, often in the rest of government, they talk about mobility and wireless interchangeably, and for us, I think that's not necessarily the case. We do have a wireless steering committee that has been created, co-chaired by CIO and by the NCSC. What they are looking at are options moving forward for how we might be able to introduce some wireless capabilities within SCIFs.
Thank you. We've got just a few extra minutes, and if you'll permit me, just one or two ad hoc questions. I just want to come back to something earlier, since we have you assembled here for this very brief moment in time, is if I get you guys just to weigh in, and how well you think the interconnectedness between the big six is in the iSight process. And I'll let just anyone sort of jump in if they want.
I think I had said earlier, this has been an incredible team to be working with, and having been trying to foment integration across the IC for over a decade now. It's rare to, usually when you have interagency groups to get together, sort of the best you can hope for is that they're not going to be too combative in defending their turf against each other. It's rare that you see a group of senior leaders who are truly putting the interests of the intelligence community first, and they're bringing to bear to that problem all of the resources and their expertise in their agencies. But they're not there to defend just their agency's equities. They're there to represent the agency as part of a larger enterprise. And so I couldn't be more pleased than to have had the experience of working with all these folks.
But I agree with that. It's been a year and a half into this, and you know, the colleagues to my left and my right, and the others that aren't with us here today, it's been amazing to work with them. We've made course corrections. We have good discussions, you know, sometimes even healthy debate, but at the end of the day, it's all about the IC first. And it is an agile process, and we've made huge course corrections and changes throughout the cycles. And I can pick up the phone and call any of my colleagues. They can do the same and say, hey, what about, or I need your help with, and it's done. And it's done, again, with the vision of the community, not just my or their particular agencies at hand. So it's working very, very well.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I've been in this role about a year and a half as well. I've never asked anybody here for help and had them say no. Every single time I've asked for support or assistance, be it a person or information or ideas, they've replied and provided what I had asked for and more. It's frankly, it's incredible. I've never had an experience like that where there's been that level of comradeship in tackling the mission.
I feel like we should all be holding hands.
I'm going to join them on the couch, I told you.
Everybody come to the couch.
Yeah, we're gonna all be on the couch.
So one last ad hoc question from Terry here, not from the bear. You guys have tremendous perspective, and you have ability to sometimes see just over the horizon, which many of us can't see. Is there anything disruptive that just notionally you see today that we should be keeping our eyes on?
So I'll talk about where I see it from the aspect of digital transformation. I think that we've got to be able to embrace automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning within our environment to help us. From a DIA perspective, many of our processes are manual. We spend a lot of time hunting for data instead of having the data come to us and allowing it to inform and lead in things. We also have a huge corpuses of data that are in stovepipe repositories, and the scariest thing for me is that many of those repositories are human beings that are going to retire probably within the next 5 years. So how do we get that knowledge out of their head or out of their file cabinet or out of the boxes that's in their office and get it and free that data so that it can be used to help inform and to make decisions? That's one of the things that I know that we have to work on inside of DIA that I see coming.
So I think obviously it's worth placing bets on the big disruptive, the hopeful disruption that AI and machine learning will bring us. But I gotta tell you, I'm a little more little more looking at disrupting the way government does business today. In my agency, in particular at NGA, I'm looking for disrupting the way we do acquisitions. I'm looking for good ideas on how to bring in new talent. So, again, I'll put 100 down on AI, but I'll put 1,000 down on what we can do tomorrow with changing the way we do business and disrupting the processes and filling out our technical core with developers and technicians and analysts, data analysts that can really make a difference in today's fight.
I mean, I'll foot stomp that. I think it's, those things are some of the blocking and tackling things, but if you can't find the right people to implement the mission and you don't have the right acquisition processes or capabilities in place to actually get to that new disruptive technology, it really doesn't do that much good. So, we're doing the same thing, looking at just totally zero-based review of all of our contracts. How can we do it differently? How can we do it faster? And then generally on the recruitment side, it's been, well, that's somebody else's mission. My job is to deal with them once they get in the door and make sure we give them great work and retain them. Well, it's not. We got to get on the edge and help recruit those people in as well. So I agree with you 100%. Get the people and fix the processes. We can take advantage of the disruptive technology. That will make a material difference.
And I think I want to build on that in a way of looking at the human capital as the disruptive piece in a way. The young folks who are coming in now and who are going to be coming in the next 5 to 10 years are going to have completely different expectations of what it is to work in an office environment than we grew up with. And you got to it before with your question about wireless and a skiff, which we think is anathema, and they're going to be stunned and they're not going to sort of accept that. So I think just the expectations of the next generation coming in, they're going to be disruptive because we're not going to, some of the just accepted ways that we do business aren't going to work aren't going to work for them, and they're going to push us to be sure to adapt to that. I think something too that's sort of challenging the way that we do business is the fact that everyone can be a developer now, that it's not something that the CIOs just own. Everybody is out there creating and producing, and we can't expect to own everything and have it all in one monolith. And how do we account for that? For all this development happening at the grassroots level, and it could be duplicative, and it could be not always lined up, and how do we make sense of that when it's not something that we can all control from the top on down?
Well, thank you all again. I just came to this mission space a few weeks ago after a long career at another side of the IC. What I found remarkable was, and just reflecting on this on the way out here, is first I'm like a kid in a candy store, all this technology here. There's just new, exciting toys for me, is the way I see it. But what I reflected on was that as I got into a new mission space and I got into new systems and applications and capabilities, my PKI followed me, right? Instantly, I'm guaranteed access to an entire new provision of mission that I had no access to before. And I was reflecting on PKI and how long that took us to iterate through and get right. But now that we have it right, look how easy it is, right? You can implement identity management in days on a new capability or application. And we can even go back as far as our IC badges and things like that, is that there is this iteration through, and sometimes it does take us trial and error to get it right. But the concepts remain and are very, very strong. And I thank all of you for persisting those through. They've been valuable to me and my teams in the past, personally. I'd also like to thank the audience today. The questions you submitted were thorough, terrific, and when Ruben sat down with them last night to decide which ones we would answer, now, they were really, really provoking and terrific for the panel to answer today. And finally, I'd like to thank the panel yourselves for your frank and honest responses today. Thank you all.